Parenting can be a challenge at the best of times. But what about when mum or dad is experiencing low mood? How to support your children when you're struggling yourself. Ben Sedley is a clinical psychologist with 2 decades' experience working with adults, children, adolescents and families. His latest book is called Holding the Heavy Stuff. It's a self-help guide for anyone who has struggled with low mood, self-doubt, worries or mean negative thoughts about themselves. Which is most human beings, Ben, really, but some struggle more than others. Ben's with me in the Wellington studio. Kia ora, welcome.
Hi.
I love your honesty at the start of this book. Something like this book is not the answer. There's no one answer. And you make the point that there's something like 100,000 self-help books on sale out there. None of them will be perfect. But what do you try to achieve? What is it you're trying to speak to in this one, called Holding the Heavy Stuff?
So 10 years ago I wrote a book for teenagers called Stuff That Sucks, and that was a book for, as you said, human beings, not for those with a diagnosis or a struggle. And people just kept saying, when's the adult version of this? And that was an exciting offer. So I had to go, and when I write it, I am imagining some of the people I talk to and thinking about the words I say to them and trying to get that across. I think most of us are struggling at the moment. There's so many scary things happening in the world, in our towns, in our families, in our lives. And
uncertainty. Humans don't like uncertainty.
We don't like uncertainty.
We're stuck with it now, aren't we?
There's so much uncertainty, and people are feeling anxious, people are feeling sad, people are ruminating over the past. And we've got to find ways to help everyone understand that these feelings, they're normal.
Well, they're normal. It helps. You know, there's an I shouldn't do an ad for an ad, but there's a TV insurance ad I quite like at the moment. So that woman who's lying awake at night and she's running through all this stuff in her head. And then she gets up and she says, well, we're one of these, aren't we? And rattles the lamp and what if I lose my job and what if this? And yes, it's an ad promoting the product, but actually it's quite cute.
All of us, right?
And then she says, great chat, let's do it again tomorrow night. We've all got stuff running in our heads. Is this, from your perspective, is this, A, to recognise that it's a common experience, although for some people perhaps it's more extreme and more serious in impact, or is it about just some basic ways of trying to talk to oneself or reassure oneself or calm oneself?
So it's not always about reassuring or calming. It's about knowing there's room inside me for the distress. That actually, the reason I feel worried is because things are worrying. The reason, things are uncertain and there's room inside me for that distress, rather than I need to calm myself because I can't handle being worried. I need to get rid of all my sadness because I can't handle being sad. Actually, sadness is pretty damn important and needed and tells us what matters to us, and we need to learn to make space inside us for it.
There's a difference between making space for it and it filling the entire space.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about perhaps some of the specific stuff in here.
So the idea, I'm drawing on acceptance and commitment therapy, which I didn't come up with, but people like the way I explain it. And the idea is that actually a huge amount of the struggle is trying not to have those thoughts, trying not to have those feelings, rather than having them. So when you say it takes up all the space, that happens when we try and push them away, get rid of all these thoughts, all these feelings. The more we try and not think about something, the more we think about it, the more we try and push away a feeling, the more we have it. Instead of saying, actually, I'm having a really crappy day and I can still do the things that matter to me, and this hard feeling, this sadness, this worry, this is going to come along for the ride. And that sounds easier said than done. And I recognise that, and I recognise that for myself on the hard days too. And it's what we've got to do. And so the book has all sorts of ideas about ways that we can treat those feelings with compassion, with curiosity, and with reminding ourselves of the ideas that really matter to us, our values.
We're going to talk about the parenting context in a minute, but is it a classic case of put your own seatbelt on and put your own mask on before helping the child next to you?
That is certainly, things are cliches for a reason, and that's absolutely...
I'm full of them today.
Yeah. It's not even... if you don't wear your own mask, you can't breathe. It's not just a nice thing to do. You're no use to anyone if you're not breathing. And this book has a whole section on holding the heavy stuff with presence, with curiosity, making space for you in there. And when we think about as a parent, you think about what message do I want to give to my children if they were struggling, and am I giving myself the same message? If my child was depressed, I wouldn't say snap out of it. I might on a bad day, but in general, I'll be trying to say, hey, honey, this is hard.
Validate the feelings. Rule number one with a child or a teen.
Kind of validate
the feelings, but we don't do it for ourselves.
We don't do it for ourselves. And, if our child was depressed, we would try and find help. And if the first help didn't work, we would find something else. And we would keep going to make sure our child got the support they needed. How do we make sure we do that for ourselves as well? Not only because we need our oxygen masks, we need to breathe, but because we're teaching our children how they need to act on if they feel depressed in their life later on. How do they learn to treat themselves with compassion and keep fighting for themselves, advocating for themselves? They learn that by watching us.
How much do you let them in then? Because we think of ourselves as protectors of children and young people. And often you'll hear this conversation, this stuff is not for them, this stuff is for grown-ups. To some extent, do we need to let them in on a little bit of, or at least acknowledge a little bit of what we're going through? It might be money worries. It might be worries about Nan's health, because they pick up on it anyway.
They know what's going on anyway. I think it always needs to be a yes, and yes, these things are hard right now, and we've got this. We're dealing with it. I'm feeling sad right now, and I'm going to make sure I look after myself, get the help I need. Rather than just saying, we've got this problem, which becomes a problem shared, and we don't want to be a problem shared. So how do we give the message to the children that, yep, things are hard right now, you're picking up on something, I'm not going to pretend there's nothing there, and the adults in your life have got this.
So let's put the context perhaps of finance. Maybe it's a business under pressure, a small business under pressure, and both parents are feeling it, or maybe it's just finances and, the bills aren't adding up. You don't want to burden them. Give me an example of how you might acknowledge what you're dealing with and also reassure them.
So for myself, the validation, the compassion. Hey, this is really hard. And beating myself up about it isn't going to make it any less hard. It's just taking more of my energy. So how do I treat myself with compassion? Tune into that compassionate voice, which is kind, strong, confident, and wise. To support myself, and when I'm talking to my children, how do I say, yeah, things are a bit tough right now, and we're dealing with it. And that might mean some changes, and we'll let you know, but we've got this under control. And that can be really hard. And when you say some families are worried about finances, I think we can say that's most families
it's
right
a lot
now.
Of families at the moment.
It's a really tough time to be a human in New Zealand at the moment.
Self-talk is an interesting one. My colleague and I were batting this around earlier. I've used this example before when in a very, very ruminative state. I can't remember which particular life drama had caused it, but you could pick one or two. And that constant voice at you. And I remember at one point being so exhausted by it, affecting sleep as well, being so exhausted by it that I just said, we're taking a break right now. We'll come back to this conversation, but we're taking a break right now. I mean, I was literally talking to myself. And you've got a little bit of this in this book. Of course I'm talking to me, but we all know there's multiple kinds of conversations that we're having with ourselves all the time in our minds, and things trying to bust their way in, and don't forget this and do this and you shouldn't have done that. And it actually worked for a moment because I promised to come back and address what I was feeling again, but for this hour I'm taking a break. Can you talk a little bit about
the way I summarise that would be two things. Firstly, we can't choose what thoughts we have, but we can choose which ones we water. As you're saying, the more I engage with a thought, the more it grows, rather than saying, actually, this thought's not needed right now, I'm going to put it aside, is exactly what I talk to people about. I encourage people to notice the tone of voice they talk to themselves in. And would you talk to anyone else in that tone of voice? And the answer is always,
You're so
no
stupid,
way
you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said that. What were you thinking?
So much of my work is, if your friend made that mistake, what would you say to them? And you're not just saying it because it's polite. You're saying it because you know beating them up doesn't work. You never get the best out of a friend or a family member or an employee by telling them how awful they are. Yet for some reason we think that's going to work for ourselves. And it doesn't.
Some of the practical stuff again, because overwhelm, uncertainty is part of our lives. And for some people, again, it's more extreme. It's like, will I be able to keep this house?
Yeah.
Will I have a roof over our kids' heads? Uncertainty, however, is our thing. But the other thing also is overwhelm, a sense of overwhelm.
Yeah.
Now, parenting, as we said, complex enough, but when that tank is empty, when you're feeling overwhelmed yourself, either you can sort of resort to just remote control and be quite removed and just go through the motions, or there's a risk, you'll say or do something you wish you didn't. How in this book, or how to a parent under load, do you talk about overwhelm? Again, acknowledge you're feeling it first.
Acknowledge your feelings, and the last section of this book is about all the more practical stuff that you need to do. You need to build up a community. Human beings aren't designed to do this by ourselves. So how do we seek support? And a lot of people around you want to help and aren't sure what to do. And let's face it, Kiwis aren't that good at intruding on people's lives when it's actually needed. So asking for things, for practical things, knowing that you'll be able to repay them in the future. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be an equal sharing right now. Right now it's your turn to struggle, and you can ask for some extra help. Practical things, can you pick the kids up from school? Can you help me with whatever these little practical things I'm having? Or actually I just need to vent someone. I don't need solutions from you. I just need someone to listen to me. People get that instruction, they're more likely to let you vent rather than jumping in with solutions. Some of the other basic stuff as well in there. When we get really distressed, we reach for our short-term solutions, the things that we know don't help us long-term, but they help us in the short term, whether it's a cigarette or a glass of wine or just
packet of biscuits or
packet
whatever.
of biscuits, or on our
Porn,
phones.
to be blunt, for some guys.
Porn is there for some people.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, that when you're under distress, you reach for a short-term solution. That's very good for survival. If you're not sure you're going to make it to tomorrow, you're not going to do what's sensible for a year's time. But actually, this level of distress isn't. You're not under immediate threat. Your body's just responding like you're under immediate threat. And doing those things that calm you, making sure you get nutrition, get some sleep. And I'm saying that very gently, because you can't just tell parents to get more sleep, because sometimes that's not an option, but to look after yourself in a way that not only allows you to look after your children, putting on your oxygen mask, but also demonstrates to them that you're worth looking after.
Actually, grabbing that moment when everyone is asleep, or grabbing that moment where you've ended up with an hour by yourself, for God's sake, lie on the sofa and have a break. Don't try and fill it with something else, You mentioned the short-term fixes. There are some that aren't drugs, alcohol, other little dopamine hits and distractions. Breathing is you're big on the breath stuff to help you call this holding the heavy stuff with presence. I like this one too, holding the heavy stuff. Compassion we kind of already done, which is the way we talk to ourselves. And curiosity is another. Is this a little bit, bring a little bit of mindfulness perhaps into the
Curiosity is, in this book, it's about seeing your thoughts and your feelings for what they are. That they are thoughts rather than content that's absolute true that I have to correct, I have to engage with. I'm able to notice, hey, look at that, my brain's being really mean to me today. Like your example you gave, rather than I have this thought, I have to get it right or correct it or fix it. So that's engaging with your thoughts with curiosity, and similarly engaging with your feelings with curiosity of, hey, right now there is a sadness inside me and I can notice that it's there, rather than I can't have it and I have to try and get rid of it.
Could you, without giving specifics, give us an idea of, from your practice, watching, or give us an example perhaps where you've seen people progress in this way? You give us a couple of wins where you've seen people be able to come through. Is there a couple of even sort of mashed up examples you could give?
Yeah, it's treating ourselves with compassion and just being able to put your hand on your heart at the end of the day and say, it's okay, I've got this, I'll get through this. Listening to that compassionate voice, it just hits the spot for some people who didn't know that was okay, that was an option. And anecdotally, my experience is when I work with men, I can remind them to be compassionate, and they can be compassionate. When I'm working with women, a lot of them need to be given permission. It's okay to give yourself compassion. And that's speaking to bigger societal problems we've got. And I haven't necessarily seen the research that backs this up, but it's something I notice a lot, that a lot of women, unfortunately, haven't been taught that it's okay to give yourself compassion. And yet, if we don't give ourselves compassion, how are we going to be able to fully, wholeheartedly give it to others?
Can you give me an example of how that might present?
It presents with yes buts. You know, we're talking about treating yourself nicely, looking after yourself, maybe eating healthier or giving yourself a break, having a sit down when your children are out of the house, and they say yes but.
So the yes but is, yes but I have to look after myself, yes but I've put on weight, yes but
yes,
I've got all these
I
things,
can't
yes but
do
the
this.
house isn't tidy.
All these things, yes, but it's not okay. I am too full, I've got to drop something, and it's going to be self-care every time. And
with the men, what would you say is the biggest difference or the biggest barrier for them?
I think men can talk to themselves really harshly, and then we will do a nice closed exercise practicing tuning into the compassionate voice, and they go, oh yeah, that's right, it's okay to do this. And this, obviously it's a generalisation, and there's a whole lot of men who have been taught it wasn't okay to ever give themselves compassion, and there are a whole lot of women who thankfully have been taught it's okay. But as a rough generalisation, reminding men that it's okay to talk to themselves the way you talk to someone else, they get it a bit faster, and women need that extra support, and so we try and give it to them.
For men, does it take a bit more sometimes to get to the point where they're happy to share their own vulnerabilities with the kids? Do they feel like, sometimes I've got this protection role, or I can't show this vulnerability?
Absolutely. That protection role shows up for all dads or something. All the work I know and I can just relate to it is, suddenly caveman me comes in, and I'm ready for the that protection role, and to be able to say, hey, I'm struggling and I've got this is really important.
Thanks for that, Ben. Very much. I think we've ticked off most of what you had in here. And actually, one thing we didn't say is that this can last a while.
Yeah.
It's nice if it goes in a day or a week or a month, but it can be something you've got to sit with for quite a long time.
Well, it's not getting better anytime soon. We've got to sit with a lot of hard stuff, and the more we struggle against it, the longer it hangs around.